Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Day 2 of APAC DNS Forum. I am Iziat, your MC for today. I am happy to share with you that you can win prizes by attending the forum sessions. So in order to win those prizes, we need you to attend all the forum sessions, engage with speakers through the Q&A, and visit all the virtual booths to collect the points. The top 10 participants who collect the most points will receive an Amazon gift card worth 50 USD. So don't miss out on this opportunity. This session is entitled Globalizing Efforts to Mitigate DNS Abuse. The purpose of this panel is to discuss the state of DNS abuse in the APAC region, with a particular emphasis on how the local experience might differ from other regions. We will look at the gaps in education and tools for the APAC community, while also discussing the potential avenues to collaborate and innovate together. Our moderator for this session will be Graham Bunton from DNS Abuse Institute. Let us welcome him. Over to you, Graham.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I was not aware there were points, and I'm very excited about that. What a fun innovation. Welcome everybody to this session. As Izian said, this is Globalizing Efforts to Mitigate DNS Abuse. And I am Graham Bunton. I'm the Executive Director of the DNS Abuse Institute, which is an organization dedicated to DNS abuse, created by Public Interest Registry, who run .org. I'm coming to you from Toronto, Canada right now, and mercifully for me, it's not super late. So we're going to hear from 4 great panelists, and I'll introduce them in a minute. Before I do that, though, I want to spend a few minutes just setting the stage for this conversation. So first, what is DNS abuse? And I think maybe we got into this a little bit yesterday. I heard some great things about some slides that Edmund had on this topic. And so I want to see those at some point too. But really what we're talking about is a set of online harms that are generally appropriately addressed by domain registries and registrars. There are lots of different definitions within the community. Lots of people want to include more in this list, some less. But generally, most people are comfortable including in this definition the distribution of malware, the operation of botnets, especially command and control, phishing, and then other people or many people include something called farming, which is a bit of a DNS hijack as well as a phish, and spam, where spam is a vehicle for those preceding harms. And there's a growing sense within ICANN itself, as well as conversations in other communities, that this is a problem and we really need to be in to get our arms around this problem and do more about it. And that's great. You know, as many of us here are participating in running the DNS, either as a domain registry or registrar, you know, if we want to benefit from the ecosystem in which we're operating, it makes sense to try and help it at the same time, to try and keep it clean of these harms that are appropriately addressed by us. But my sense is that a lot of the conversation around DNS abuse has been extremely Western-centric. And I say this, again, as a Canadian talking to you from Canada. But I spend all day thinking about DNS abuse and how to mitigate it and help everyone do more about it. And it's very apparent to me that the conversations we're having are all in English, that the tools are all in English, especially as we get into things like machine learning algorithms to detect abuse. Those are mostly trained on Western-centric data sets. And so it feels like there's a lot of work to be done there about making all of those tools and resources available. The education components of this, I think, are all primarily English, and my own work is guilty of that too. So there's lots to be done. And I think today we're going to hear from our panelists a bit about their experiences in mitigating DNS abuse, how it affects them and their businesses and their operations, and to hear those from an APAC perspective. And my goal is that collectively we can learn from these experiences especially about the APAC experience of DNS abuse. And hopefully in these discussions, we're going to find some of the places where we can begin to collaborate and work together, identify some of the tools and resources that need to be adapted or translated, and begin to help the APAC region solve this problem in a way that's appropriate for the APAC region. So we've got 4 great speakers to share their thoughts. First up is going to be Sophia Feng, the General Manager of ZDNS. After that, we'll hear from Edmund Chung, who's the CEO of .Asia, followed by Anil Jain, CEO of Nixie. And lastly, Yoshi Murakami, Representative Director of Comlada Japan. So we'll hear from all of you, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of discussion, some room for some Q&A, hopefully highlight some thoughts that have come out of this chat, and then we'll wrap it up. There is a Q&A pod if people want to put in questions. We'll try and answer those. I can't promise we'll get to them all, but we'll make a best effort. We only have an hour here today, and I've used up already 6 minutes of that. And so we'll see how much we can do. But this is really about starting the conversation that I think is going to continue to happen over the coming months and years. So I'll stop there. Sophia, thank you very much for joining us. I would love it if you could share your thoughts on the topic, please.
Sure. Thank you, Graham. And good morning, everyone. And hi from Beijing. And I'm Sophia Fan. I'm from National Engineering Research Center of the Internet Domain Name System, also known as ZDNS. We has provided technical backend services and compliance policies consultancy for over 50 registry operators and registrars. Thank you for having me today to take this opportunity to share with you the DNS abuse landscape and best practices in China. And in China, as we talk about the DNS abuse, as Grant just mentioned, it's usually related with the serious compliance challenges. The challenges usually is misuse of domains and website contents to avoid supervision and infringement on the personal and property safety of the internet users and the domain users. For example, the proportion of phenomena such as cyber gambling, cyber squatting, phishing, troll hunt virus distributions, spam and botnet in the China domain name industry is continuing to rise. And as you probably will notice, during the pandemic period, according to the analysis of the National Anti-Fraud Center in China, in the first half year of the 2021, there were more than 101,000 cases of telecom and network fraud relying on the use of bulk registrations, and which has increased more than 70% year-on-year growth than 2020. So as you know, the pandemic is more people are using internet and stay at home, and that's why it's the related DNS abuse fraud is increasing as well. And for those harms on websites and DNS abuse behavior, the registry and the registrars in China usually use a multi-source discovery and reporting mechanism, also together with comprehensive analysis information to actively detect the system and manage the misuse of domain names. So once such DNS abuse is discovered and detected, the registry operators and registrars will usually check and verify and suspend the related domain names to prevent the further damage. But you know, it's usually required by the administration bureau to actively do something about those domain names. So after the domain name is suspended, which usually means the domain is server hold and the website is confirmed to have been illegally accessed. And generally, the registered operators will also contact domain name owners directly or through the registrars to assist the registrants to notify them and solving related issues. In China, it's more well-governance in the registry and registrar sites to collaborate to solve those DNS abuse system. But we also have seen the trend, and that's DNS abuse behavior has moving abroad. So that means that the Chinese registrant or those behavior conductors will usually register bulk registrations toward international registrar, and that's harder for the registry and registrar in mainland China to collaborate with the global registrar community to actively solve those issues. So I think that's the challenge we have seen at the moment. Is also due to the language barriers, and so also due to the cultural barriers, and due to the differences of processes, and also differences of legally approach. So I think being able to bridge the barriers in order to for us actively to solve the DNS abuse. I think it would be a great idea to have a global platform that be able to connecting all the different registrars from globally, and also we have a more streamlined processes and the ways of reporting that abuse. And then, to provide the information and to provide the enough resources to the registrars to be actively act on those reportings. So I think that's my sharing of the situation in China and practices. Thank you, Greg. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Sophia. That was great. And you raised a number of really interesting issues that I think we'll come back to at the end after we've heard from everybody. But I'm interested, so you can think about it between now and then, in about the tools that you're using and whether you're building them yourselves or whether you'll be able to find some that meet your needs in the market. And then that relationship between being aggressive on abuse inside of China, for example, and seeing that move elsewhere. For yourself and others, I'm really curious to hear about what that experience is like, because I think it provides interesting lessons for what we can all do collectively and what happens to abuse when we're all more rigorous. So thank you again, Sophia. I think the next up is going to be Edmund to share his own experience with us. Edmund, please.
Thank you, Graham. And this is Edmund from .Asia, and thank you for having me here. As Graham mentioned yesterday, I shared some of the work that that .Asia is doing in terms of DNS abuse, and I'll come back to that later on. But I want to, I guess, give a little bit of a high level perspective on this a little bit, building on what Graham mentioned in terms of Asia or Asia Pacific region really being a little bit behind in the discussion. In some ways, I think that is probably a true statement, especially in terms of the awareness and for DNS abuse itself not being a high interest topic. As you can see, I mean, it is definitely not of a high interest topic for like big company or even IT companies or legislative directions like, even in the US or in Europe, where it's being actively discussed in those that kind of level. Certainly DNS abuse is not in that realm of discussion here in Asia, at least as far as I can see or understand it, and that represents good and bad. in my view. It is good in the sense that we have the opportunity to develop the right narrative and what really is DNS abuse, and what registries and registrars, especially the DNS industry, can or should not, should or should not be doing. So I think that is that's good part, and also the measures to mitigate against different types of abuses are directed a lot more towards hosting providers closer to the source, which are, sort of all good in that sense. However, there is a problematic side of the situation as well. It actually means that domain usage from SMEs are really not as the small, medium-sized businesses are actually not as prevalent as in the US and EU. The reliance on platforms, the concentration of traffic towards platforms really kind of translates also into user behavior directed and emphasis on platforms, and therefore the issues are not surfacing in the same way. DNS abuse is not understood as much as in the EU or the US context, simply because that domain names are not as prevalently used, especially for smaller companies. And so the mitigation measures at the moment are not directed to the DNS. As I mentioned, I don't see much legislation or so forth. But that also, is one part of the situation. Of course, this brings into play also the question of autonomy of small businesses and digital identity and those kind of things, but we won't touch on that today. What is interesting, though, is that phishing is, of course, a high interest topic, and it relates to DNS abuse in certain ways, but not, fully intersecting. But what is interesting is observing policies that are actually put in place in Asia Pacific. I take Hong Kong and Singapore, for example. If you look at .hk, what is interesting is that their policy actually prevents any registration, any domain name that contains the word bank, basically contains the 4 letters BANK, is not accepted. So it takes on a very different approach. You can't even register something bank. So that is one of the measures to address some of the issues. And Singapore recently, I think, this is not directly on DNS, but even for SMS, they're, having a blacklist for the SMS tag, where you see the company name or whoever is sending you SMS for. You can't have certain tags, and they're blacklisting certain words in that. And that's I guess in some ways, I see it as an authoritarian tendencies here in Asia, as you see. So those dynamics together gives you a higher level, I think, hopefully give you a higher level feel of, why perhaps this is not surfacing. But I don't think, I think that this will probably surface into the future, though, as the domain industry develops here in Asia. And here, if I may, I don't know whether I can share screen. Oh, yes, and I'll just. And going back to, I think, the opportunity to develop a right narrative. Graham mentioned it briefly, so I don't want to repeat all my presentation yesterday, but I want to highlight a few of the slides. And I think it gives us an opportunity to develop the right narrative, and this is one of the things that .Asia and TWNIC is doing, and we've just announced the launch of a mutual notifier, trusted notifier mechanism between the organization. But here's, DNS abuse is not very much understood. In fact, not only in Asia, but around the world. Here is how I sort of understand the ecosystem of the DNS. You have on one side the registries and registrars and the things that we manage and control, and part of what ICANN manages and controls as well. And then you have all the other parts of the infrastructure beyond the DNS, the hosting, the web platforms, and then the content, and of course the end users. One interesting aspect of the ecosystem is our CCTLDs, country code tuple of domains like .cn, .jp, and .tw. They're not directly under what we call, the ICANN's remit, if you will, and in terms of ICANN policies. But a lot of times abuses, when talked about, involves all of these aspects, and only a very small slice might, intersect with what registries and registrars can actually do. And the better way to really look at it, in my view, and that's what I'm trying to, I guess, hopefully that more people know, is that, there are lots of, different types of cyber abuses. Only a small part of it is DNS abuse. And even smaller part of it is appropriate for top-level domain registries to actually act upon. Because, for example, there are abuses where, let's say there's an abuse in one of the pages of Alibaba, right? You're not gonna shut down the whole Alibaba.com just for that particular problem, right? I mean, and therein lies the intersection between platforms and domains, and also why in Asia, I think the reliance on platforms have kind of made DNS abuse less surfaced in terms of a high level discussion. But going further into this little diagram that I show, is that you see that part that abuses for TLDs to handle does not just include DNS abuse. In fact, there are other aspects like the intellectual property rights, trademark infringement, and also CSAM, which is children's sexual abuse materials online. There are abuses that are not quite DNS abuse, but actually what registries need to take care of as well. But of course, there are some of those that are DNS abuses like phishing, malware, and so on, and that the registries can take care of. And these are the 5 that I think have gained very well consensus around the community. And I won't go into details, but recently, and we also talk about the two aspect, which is called the malicious registrations versus compromised registrations, because and Sophia, building on what Sophia mentioned earlier, this is these malicious registration side is something that many registries are taking, working on, and I think in China, as Sophia mentioned, some of these malicious registrations, because they are tackled, now start to jump to other TLDs or outside of China in terms of registrars, and that's what we call registrar hopping, in the case that that jumps to different registrars, and also TLD hopping, maybe jumping from .cn to some other TLD. And so this is just as to wrap up, I guess, to mention one of the things that .asia and TWNIC is doing is what we are doing is trying to set up is actually fairly simple. We're trying to we are setting up ourselves as mutual trusted notifiers, so that if the .asia team sees a problematic domain in .tw, we can notify them for an expedited takedown, and likewise on the other side. And the reason for that is because we understand the sensitivity of what should be taken down or what should not be taken down in the in the view of a registry, and through that it's a more bilateral arrangement right now. We are hoping to expand that to other country code top level domains that are .asia members around the region, and this is a little bit different from, I guess, Graham, your initiative in terms of DNS Abuse Institute, which is equally valuable. The way that we are approaching the issue here in Asia is through these bilaterals, looking at, because the CCTLDs may be very different in terms of their processes and so on. We think that's a better approach. And the final item that I just want to bring out is that an interesting observation also on DNS abuse related topic, I would say, is on the flip side. Here in Asia, you see a lot of government censorship being implemented by the DNS, intercepting the DNS, of course, in censorship countries, and even recently in Hong Kong, and I understand that even in Japan, where certain domains are banned because of child porn or so those kind of things. And I think that's also a different dynamic than you would see in the US and in Europe. So as a brief summary, I think the region is a little bit behind in terms of tackling DNS abuse, but there is good and bad. On the good side is that the attention and direction is towards probably close to the source and the right direction more so. Also good for shaping the right narrative for DNS abuse for the DNS industry, registries and registrars especially. But there are also some problems. Domain names not being embraced enough, and when governments tinker with the DNS and different types of policies put in place. I think this is a timely discussion, and this is the time to really engage the Asian Pacific technical community as well as the policy community to develop the right narrative around the topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edmund. And there was, boy, those slides were great, and I was very pleased to see them. Your circle diagram, I think, is really excellent, and I sure hope people caught that, and we'll make sure to share those, because it really explains the world of online harms and the sort of subset that we can talk about. I also thought it did a nice job of highlighting that there are other harms that we would not call DNS abuse, but are often so bad that are appropriately addressed by domain registries and registrars. A lot of that covered in something called the Framework to Address Abuse, which I encourage people to check out, but sort of adjacent to the conversation we're having here today. One of the benefits, if APAC is a bit far behind, and I'm not sure I'm ready to say that because I just need to learn more about what's happening first. But I think you benefit from some of the conversations that are happening in other places, especially like ICANN circles around malicious versus compromised, which you brought up, Edmund. That distinction, malicious registrations versus a website that had, like, say, WordPress and got hacked, becomes compromised. That distinction as being important for registrars and registries and what they do is basically brand new for this community as a whole. And so, this region gets to benefit from that work right away, and doesn't have to sort of trudge through years of waffling about what everything means, and so can benefit from the sophistication of those conversations pretty quickly. And so that's exciting to see. And then very interesting on these bilateral agreements, and is that a model for trust amongst operators in the space? Could well be, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I'll stop talking now, and I'll pass it over to Anil Jain from Nixie, who run .in. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Graham, for giving me this opportunity and talking to the relevant people regarding this particular thing. So first of all, I would like to introduce Nixie. Nixie started for providing the internet exchanges in the country, but later on taken over the management of cctld.in and .bharat, and also the National Internet Registry for providing the internet protocol addresses to the community. What I see that DNS abuse is really a serious concern, because it is not only impacting the goodwill of the company or the individual. It is not only taken away the finances from the people, but I think the major question which we as a community has to think about is that it is eroding the trust which internet has in the people. People have started suspecting, especially during COVID season. We found that more and more number of people have logged on the internet, and they started facing problems, and they started raising questions on the trustworthiness of the internet. I think this is a very important aspect which we have to see. So let me share the screen, and let me so we are on DAR. We joined DAR somewhere around 6 months back, and we found that this is the latest report which we have got. As far as .in is concerned, maximum abuse we are getting is the spam, followed by phishing and malware. So this is a representation. I think this is one concern which we would like to inform this community, is that DAR is a good software to give us the comparison of the various type of DNS abuse, but it is not giving the further to this, means how many, means the number is not given. And also indication is that how we have to improve upon and mitigate the DNS abuse in future. In India, we have several agencies which are working on DNS abuse and cyber attack mitigation. And most important is the CERT-in, which is the CERT organization is there in all the countries. So these are the type of incidents which are handled by CERT-in at present. We must have seen, we may see that virus malicious code is there, website defacement is there, phishing is there, website intrusion, malware, propaganda is there. And one important thing is the largest on this pie is the unauthorized network scanning. So basically, this is a government agency which get in touch with various organizations, and they permit them to scan their network on regular basis. And this is how the most of the inputs which are coming to CERT-in are from this this part of the scanning, which we call it unauthorized network scanning. Now let us see that this is the .in data for the last 6 years, which says that how much websites were defaced. And on the bottom, if you've seen the number of .in domain which are present at present, although from the figure it appears that a number of websites which are getting defaced are slightly increasing or living constant for the last 3 years. But if you see the number of websites which are defaced as a percentage of the total number of domains which are existing are increasing. It means that the efforts which are being taken in this part of the world are giving results. And the results are visible, and also they can be experienced by the users. Let us see that what in the CERT-in we do 3 type of activities in the CERT-in. One is the proactive things, then the reactive, and the assurance. In the proactive, we take the actions like this, that cyber threat intelligence exchange operations with organization. We target organization like banks, registry like .in, defense organization, transport organizations. So these and the networks which we share the intelligence which we are receiving on regular basis. Issuance of alert. If the alerts have come, then again we alert the organizations and give the advisories how to mitigate that. Then CERT also have a international cooperation on cybersecurity issue on regular basis, so that whatever information is shared, we take action. As far as the operation is concerned, it is 24/7 operation, and whenever anything happens to any network which is of importance, then the activity and the action immediately goes on this. Then there are certain assurances which we are working. Assurances are like we do the cyber audits on regular basis to various companies, specifically initially focusing to the government, but whichever private organization also authorized, then they do it. Then crisis management plan is also prepared and it is shared with everybody. And then we do the exercise on regular basis, which is both international and domestic organization. In addition to certain, we have a network of more than 100,000 police stations across the country. They have a specific cyber cell to monitor what is happening in this particular space, because this is very, very important. So let us understand that what is happening in this. These are the cyber crimes which are reported in police for the last 5 years. And if you have seen that it is increasing, and it is expected also because the number of domains are increasing, the utilization of internet as a user are increasing. I just want to inform all the audience that we have around 1.2 billion mobile connections in the country, and India has already crossed around 870 million internet and broadband users. So these things are increasing, and they are expected to be increased also. Now let us look at that, what police has found, that which are the different type of abuses which are reported. If this particular screen is clear, saying that ransomware is the highest which is reported in the last 3-4 years, and it is increasing, followed by cyber stacking and bullying of women and children. This is a serious concern in the Asia Pacific region because of the culture in which we live. And then followed by violation of privacy. Fake news on social media is the latest trend which is coming up, and I think everybody is concerned. Indian government is focused on this particular thing, and we have given a lot of advisories to the social media to avoid these things. And I think everybody knows that this was a discussion during the US presidential election also. Then cyber blackmailing, tampering computer sources, data theft, cyber terrorism, and interception or monitoring of description of information is few things which are there. Now let us look at that, what we have done to mitigate these things. One is that we develop an algorithm. As Edmund was telling about the blocking of BANK bank in the HK, we definitely do it. Like we have gov.in for the government, mil.in for the military. So if any domain is requested with these names in the pre of the domain which is requested, or in the middle or at the end, we don't allow that. So this is one mitigation work which we have done, and we are quite successful in that. And then registry participation in the global coordination through certain. We have recently introduced a thing for eKYC. We have a citizen system in India, citizen card system called Aadhaar, where what we are doing is that anybody who is applying for a domain, we are checking their authenticity using eKYC, and this is purifying the existing, purifying the new who is, and we hope that we should be able to purify the existing through the renewal of the domain name also. Another thing is that whenever any abused domain is reported to us, we see that it is not only suspended, we block also some of the domain which we feel are really threatening to the whole community or to the nation. And we revise the INDRP as an experience and giving on regular basis. Now let us see that few things which we have developed. One thing is the DNS Health Analyzer is developed by CDEC in India. Basically, there are two versions of this. One on 8 parameters and second on 17+ parameters. This DNS health report basically check how vulnerable a particular DNS is. And if a DNS is really vulnerable, then action has to be taken either to stop it or to modify it, and talk and discuss with those people who are doing. So this can be utilized by anywhere in the world. We have given the URL to all of them on this through the presentation, and this can help the whole community to work. The another thing which we are working on this is the email safeness scorer. Mozilla Thunderbird is the internationally known, but what we have done is that we have developed a Mozilla Thunderbird plugin which can be downloaded by the email, and whenever any email is coming to you at that particular time, this particular software can pop in and indicate to us whether this email is safe to open, or if there is a possibility of phishing attack, or there is a possibility of malware attack, or there is a possibility of scam. So again, this can be used anywhere in the world. Now let us, at the end, I just want to discuss also that what is required to be done. I personally feel that the main focus should be on who is data. So purification of the new and as well as existing who is data is important. Then second, I think we have to find out who are the habitual abuser. We have to filter, we have to develop the algorithm to ensure that they not only working in India, but they should not go to China, they should not go to Hong Kong and then start doing this activity from there. Another thing which is there is that today we are blocking the DNS abuser, a DNS abused DNS, but there is no punitive action which is being taken. So I think there is a requirement that we should discuss with the lawful enforcement agencies, and we should give some kind of legislation, punitive legislation for habitual DNS abusers. And this, the last point is being discussed at CCNSO also, in ICANN also, and I think it's important that we should all share best practices and adopt the suitable practices from other part of the world. This is all I just wanted to share with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anil. Lots of interesting stuff in there, and I appreciate the slide on having ways forward. I think it's useful to begin discussing some of those. There's a couple other bits in there I found quite interesting. The rise of website defacement isn't something I've come across a lot before, and I'm not sure I would include it in DNS abuse. But a website defacement is it's no different from a compromised website, and then we get into malware and phishing. And so I think there's a relationship there that's worth maybe unpacking a little bit in another conversation. We've got about 18 minutes left, and I still want to hear from Yoshi, so we're going to go do that. And what I've noticed, there's a couple questions in the Q&A pod. We'll try and answer them after Yoshi's intervention. Yoshi, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Yoshi Murakami from Globalizing, Japan. Yeah, I'm actually from the business sector, and I work for the domain name registrar. I created registrar, but we only provide the domain names and related services for the enterprises. The good news here is that we have very short time, but Edmond actually hacked my brain and said something I really wanted to say. So he pretty much covered everything I was going to say. So I can probably finish my presentation now, but at least I did some slides, so I'll probably share it with you, but go really quickly. I just want to show you things happening in Japan. This is actually a data I got from Japanese government that, as you see, the targets and dark techniques, this is very common things and not deviated from the global situation, right? This is what also understood in Japan. And show you the example of numbers of the phishings reported in Japan. Numbers are very small. I have a question about it, but this is the number reported, but it's not important. The thing is, it's actually have jumped in last year to the double. This actually means the COVID and all those digital transformation actually affect to the domain name situation as well. And What I want to say is Japan is a very unique market, probably other Asian countries too. The traditional industries and the companies are mostly from Japan, and still the main market is in Japan. And brands, majority is domestic. This actually means every internet things and even any abuses are done in Japanese. Emails and websites all in Japanese. So if anything Japanese people see, anything in English or different language, they think they don't touch it, even that's a fake or not. They don't touch it. They don't really see it. So that's how they actually mitigate it. First filter is different language. You don't touch it. You just ignore it. That's what happened in Japan. We can skip this. And this is abuses in cyberspace in Japan. And as Edmund said, DNS abuse is just only a part of it. But you can actually see many of the things are related to DNS abuse as well. And yeah, the market situation, this is very interesting because I was actually a speaker for the policy meeting for the legal enforcement in Japan. They actually hear from a number of people and decide they create the law for Japan for cyber strategies, right? But I talked about DNS abuse, but I didn't get much attention from anyone in the government. That's very interesting for me. And here, the market in Japan focuses on internet frauds, for example, online banking and mobile payments. That's what people are skimmed from money. Domestic market is big, and there are many domestic brands. DNS abuses are abusing brands are mostly from Japan. This is the same thing, but mainly Japanese languages and other languages happens, people just ignore it. So the cases here, this is also related to the language that some fake websites, emails had non-native Japanese, fake Japanese emails, right? But people just spot it and say, oh no, this is a fake email. This is fraud. People just ignore it. But nowadays, lately, those people are getting smarter and maybe AI or technologies, right? And Japanese language of fraud emails getting really, really good. And native people are even spot on. I probably sometimes feel like, oh, this is fake or not, you know, there's a big question. And the cases here, how they actually find it is that well-known brands were attacked, national mass or internet media publishes it in the news. That's how people actually find it. So people don't go to any websites or government's websites often and try to find if there's any accidents or problems. And fraud on the internet banking is increasing since 2019. And this is actually 2 years ago or last year, 2 cryptocurrency service providers, customer data was stolen, leaked. This was caused by an ICANN accredited registered server was hacked, and the name server or domain names had changed. So the end users actually were taken to the different destination. That's how they actually got a data skimmed. And this is very recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, some local governments, like whatever the prefectures, right? And had a fake email just sent out as a spam. And as the news said, I don't know the show number, but 92 million emails were sent to people using the fake email of the governments. So this is the main problems, like spams and the fake emails, and people get money taken off from that. So what I actually think is that domain name service is commonly understood as easy to register and cheap, right? This is a business problem, but people don't pay much attention onto that. The common understanding is also commonly understood by the legal persons, which is companies, including some enterprises. It's easy and cheap, right? And DNS is not comprehensively understood. Domain names are still not understood as an important corporate brand's assets. That is also a problem. And after 25 years of the common use of the internet, Japan still needs more education on DNS. I really hate to say that because many members of my family are from education industry, and I was the one against it, but I still think we need a lot of education. And this, the technical parts or policy parts, we can actually leave it to professionals, but we still need education in Japan. And this is, to me, like talking about the car industry, is like, there's a lot of car accidents, number of people killed, and car industries actually have created new technologies to mitigate the accidents, right? But if you're gonna have zero accidents, you have to get rid of the cars, which is nonsense. It's not realistic, right? And domain name or internet is an infrastructure of our life now, and we can't get rid of it. So what you need is you have to educate people, end users, as well as us professionals have to make policies and technologies. That's, I think, what we need for the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoshi. Some really interesting pieces in there I found about people using language as a filter and how that's becoming less effective over time as cyber criminals get better at using Japanese. An interesting piece in there too on what I would call DNS security as opposed to DNS abuse. And DNS security to me is about ensuring that registry and registrar operations, or even resolver operations for that matter, are robust, healthy, secure. And then that last bit about domains as a valuable asset, especially for small or for businesses, where it's an important piece of your infrastructure, and protecting it appropriately, I think is a topic I haven't thought a lot about. So we've got about 8 minutes left. We've got 3 questions in the chat, and I want to talk a little bit about what I'm working on and what I've got from this. And so let's try and see if we can answer a couple of these questions really quickly. And then we'll see if we can summarize some of this discussion. So the first one, and maybe this is for the registrars on the panel, is from Nura Mohammed. Is there any differences in managing DNS abuse by GTLD or CCTLD? Does one or the other give you more tools at your disposal? Maybe Sophia, you might have a thought on that, if I can put you on the spot. You're muted, Sophia, if you're talking.
Sorry about that. All right. So I think this question is related probably with Graham would ask me before about the tools that we're using. So I would say that the registrar usually will adopt the cyber threat intelligence databases as a tool to proactively detect the DNS abuses domains. And by access to those tools, that it's a lot of tools actually usually puts CCTLD and GTLD in one box. So when they detect one related domains, for example, it's a phishing domains under .cn, and that tools will usually detect related domains under the other GTLDs and other TLDs like .com, .net, and also the new GTLDs. So that's by using the tools like ZDNS, we provide those tools to the registries, so they'll be able to use them to detect them. And besides the tools, we also have the mechanisms, like we adopted a mechanism to solve those DNS abuse. Like I said, we have kind of coordination centers in China, which called CNCERT. They usually receive a lot of reporting of phishing and spams, DNS abuse reports, and then also they have contacts with the registry operators and also backends like us, and also with other registrars. So what they do is once they receive those reports, they will contact us through emails. And then provided those verifies evidence those domains are maybe financial related, And then we be able to contact those registry operators to proactively act on those requests. So once the registry operator will probably do a double check. Once they detected it's the same results as the search, and they will recommend. So like I said, that in China, I think previously we only using the tools and mechanisms only for the CCTLD, like the CN. But that later on, we also including all the TLDs and GTLDs into the community and all into the circle. So that's I think, but also what I noticed that the different reaction times between different registry operators are different. Like the CCTLDs are usually very quick on reacting on those requests, and also new GTLD as well. But some of the overseas TLDs, for example, the legacy ones that's not operating in China, and then they need more time and internal processes in order to process those requests. So that's probably what happens in China.
Thanks, Sophia. I'm pretty conscious we've only got about 4 minutes left, and there's a couple pieces I want to see if I can tie together. If I can maybe answer myself a question in the chat. I'm going to pronounce it horribly, I'm sorry. Nitin Wali was asking about how you balance growth with being responsible on DNS abuse. And I think this is a really important question that we need to have some more conversations on. There has not been a lot of research on what drives DNS abuse. So we really don't know. So we know a fair amount, and Anil was talking about DAR, and we're measuring the symptoms of DNS abuse, which is how much phishing and malware is out there. And that's important work and something the DNS Abuse Institute is also working on. But we don't really know what drives it. We've got some pretty good educated guesses. Almost certainly there's going to be a relationship with price, that the lower the retail price, the more abuse you're going to get. And I don't think it is by default impossible to offer low-cost DNS abuse, low-cost domains. But if you're going to do that to drive your growth, you need to make sure that you've got the tooling in place, the mechanisms and processes in place to be able to see those incoming registrations and make sure that they're not abusive. And if they are, to respond to them quickly. I think that's about how you would grow responsibility. And so you need to make sure if you're going to do one thing, you've got the pieces to make sure you're reacting. One of the last bits, and I see your hand, Anil, I'll come to you in a sec. I wanted to share some of the work that the institute that I run is working on, because I think it's going to be helpful for this community. One is we're working on educational resources out there, how to distinguish between a compromised website and a malicious registration. And we're going to be working, hopefully with partners in this community, to translate and disseminate that work, to get it in front of everybody, to help everybody understand these issues. One of the other big things that we're working on and launching hopefully in June, just ahead of the ICANN meeting in The Hague, is going to be a sort of universal abuse reporting tool that is going to take abuse reports from anywhere, anyone, standardize them, make them high quality, enrich them with information from other sources like block lists and intelligence from the internet, and then get them to the registries and registrars where they need them, when they need them. And it's my hope that work like this, bringing people together, is really going to help us combat DNS abuse collectively. But one of the messages I've heard today a few times, and I think it's related to that, is about relationships and collaborating in this space. Edmund talked about .Asia's relationship with TWNIC, and I think that's a really interesting bilateral model, and there's plenty of room for that. But I think there's also more room for all of us to begin coming together, and not just in panels like this, but in, hopefully rooms where we can get together and talk about DNS abuse and share our practices and understand what works and what doesn't, and really begin to figure out those differences, especially for the APAC region, and help make ourselves all better. And I think there's a ton of room for that. And I will help try and lead that, but I definitely need partners in the APAC region because there's just so much I don't understand. And so expect to hear from me, all of you in the audience and on the panel. I think we are at time, and so probably we need to wrap it up. I'm sorry, Anil, I didn't get to your hand. Thank you very much, though, panelists, Yoshi, Sophia, Edmund, and Anil. I appreciate you coming and sharing those experiences with us today. Apologies for those people who had questions we didn't get to. Thank you very much for coming. I hope everybody has an excellent rest of their APAC DNS Forum 2022. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our respective speakers, Sophia, Edmund, Anil, and Yoshi. And not to forget our moderator, Graham, for sharing with us on the efforts to mitigate DNS abuse. So at the moment, if you could kindly fill out the survey that will pop up in front of your screens right about now.
Host and panelist.
Okay, and if you have more thoughts to share with us, you may fill it in the form that will be provided in the chat box. Please join our gamification and grab the chance to win the Amazon gift card worth 50 USD that could be yours. So for more details, you may visit apacdnsforum.my. The next session is on being a registrant, things to note. It will start at 11:15 in UTC+8 and UTC. We will see you there.